an FAQ, a frequently asked questions video. Sometimes fervently asked questions. I figured it's the 8th anniversary of Relics of Hyrule as of recording this video, so why not answer a few more questions and have them in video form? So without further ado, I'm not going to go down the rabbit hole of my life story. Let's just get into the questions. Question number one, you're still doing this? Yes. Yes, I am. It's been going for 8 years, and I'm still enjoying it, so I'm still doing it. Sometimes people have returned to the mod after a long while, and they've said, wow, it's still going and it's still growing. Absolutely. I don't see it stopping anytime soon. So yeah, it's still going. I'm still doing this. But what if Nintendo breaks down your door and tells you, stop. Zelda's ours, get out of here. I'll say, okay, yeah. I'll take down the mod and rework it into something completely different. Well, but also similar. So, like, my idea would be rename it something like Relics of Ruthenia and rework the weapons to look completely different and be distinct from Zelda. So it would be a very similar experience, but it would not be Zelda. That would be my idea. I don't think that would happen. I really don't think Nintendo would break down my door and say stop. They haven't in the past 8 years. I don't think they really care because this is not a replacement for a Zelda experience, and I'm making sure that it isn't. It's still very much Skyrim, and I'm not copying anything from Zelda and pasting it. I'm not ripping assets. So I think we're good. I don't think Nintendo's going to tell me to stop. Can you make a patch for enter mod here? Legacy of the Dragonborn, Winter Sun, Sunhelm, Frostfall. No. Whatever it is, no. I don't have time. I recommend checking out the patch hub made by the Relics of Hyrule community. You can check there, ask them. I don't have time. Likewise, do you do commissions for other mods? Can you help with my mod? I cannot. I don't have time. So, if you're working on a mod that allows you to befriend walruses, first you would have to have walruses in the game. But if you're adding a walrus themed mod or something, I don't know. I can't help you. I can't help you with that, and I'm not the one to make it. I don't have time. Will you be adding Breath of the Wild stuff? Yes. Yes, I will. Breath of the Wild came out in 2017, and I have been adding Breath of the Wild content. And I'm going to be adding more. 6.7 is when there's going to be a big sort of Breath of the Wild push. That's coming up sometime in 2022. So, keep your shirt on. I am adding Breath of the Wild stuff. I am adding the Sheikah Slate. I'm adding Sheikah Shrines, Sheikah Towers. I'm adding Divine Beasts. They're all going to be very different because of the way that Relics of Hyrule is set up, but they will be in the mod. And any Breath of the Wild thing that you're thinking of, I am considering it. But Breath of the Wild stuff is coming, and Breath of the Wild 2, once Breath of the Wild 2 comes out, absolutely I will add Breath of the Wild 2 content. What about Age of Calamity? Age of Calamity is a spin-off game that I don't like, and it's not a focus. I am focusing on the main series titles. I don't want to do too much with the spin-offs. Obviously, there's some room for spin-off content, but it has to be something really compelling, and Breath of the Wild takes precedence over Age of Calamity. So, there you go. So those are all the questions that people have asked, but sort of understood question that people have, whether they realize it or not, is sort of a not understanding of the Relics of Hyrule design principles, if that makes sense. Like, not understanding how the mod is set up, how I build it, and how I go about deciding whether something fits. So, here's how I kind of design the mod. There's a quote by Brian David Gilbert that goes, "Sometimes creators intentionally leave blank space, and it's fun to speculate what bizarre truths could fill that space. But it's less fun to carve those into canon. There are rarely, if ever, any foolproof answers to subjective questions." So sometimes people ask, like, what happened to the Zoras? Or how does this event in Relics of Hyrule connect to this event in Elder Scrolls? What about the Aedra and Daedra? Was this in the Dawn era, Merethic era? Was Sheogorath involved with this and all these like details? And it's fun to think about those details, but I choose to not really do much with those. So I try to avoid Zelda retcons and influences on canon whenever possible, and that includes Elder Scrolls canon. So I try to avoid direct connections, which is another one, no direct connections. So those kind of go hand in hand. For instance, a lot of people have suggested, oh, Red Mountain is Death Mountain. I have never said that, and I never will say that. That's sort of like saying Mount St. Helens is Mount Rainier, is Eyjafjallajökull. It's not the same. Just because they're volcanoes and just because they happen to be close by. Well, Eyjafjallajökull is not that close to Mount St. Helens, but you get what I'm saying. I don't want to make those direct connections, because if I say Red Mountain is Death Mountain, then that kind of frames things in a different way, and it doesn't feel right, if that makes sense. So, no direct connections, no Zelda retcons. Don't rehash, that's another one of my rules. Don't overtell. So I try to leave things open to interpretation, and I try not to repeat myself, and I try not to, like, retell Zelda stories that already exist. And, you know, there's that general golden rule in storytelling of show, don't tell. It's hard to do that when so much of your story is in the past. But I want to leave gaps open so people can be like, oh, is Zelda the same Zelda as in Twilight Princess, or is she the same Zelda as in Wind Waker? It's open to interpretation. That kind of thing. Simplicity is another one of my design principles. I want to keep things simple. If things get too complicated, then, you know, it muddles things. The mod is already kind of esoteric. People have complained that it's hard to get into, and that's the way it is. Unfortunately, that's just how the mod is. So simplicity is what I'm going for. Sometimes people suggest really complicated things, like mechanics of a boss that you have to hit certain parts of them, or when they get down to a certain level, they change. And that's possible, and it's definitely reminiscent of Zelda, but that's not what I'm going for. I'm not really trying for a 100% Zelda experience. I'm just kind of trying to do something different. And actually, uniqueness. That's another thing. I want to try to make things unique so that it's not the same thing over and over. I don't want like a million different things that are exactly like the Master Sword. That's sort of with the don't rehash, but it's sort of specifically, I want the items to stand by themselves. And there's something else to be said about avoiding, I guess, feature creep. Sometimes when ideas are being suggested, people get really excited, and rightly so. But then they start, like, putting all these bells and whistles on it. Like the Master Sword, somebody figured out, and by somebody I mean D. Magnus, author of Artifacts of Ultima, which, if you like Relics of Hyrule, check out Artifacts of Ultima. D. Magnus figured out how to make a sword glow when orcs are nearby. That kind of thing. And so somebody was like, oh, the Master Sword should do that. And I'm like, is it that? Does the Master Sword do that in Zelda? I don't feel like we need to do that. So I want to avoid feature creep where items or the mod itself is doing too much and it's overburdened. It's already huge, so I don't want to overburden it. Finally, the most important thing when I design things for Relics of Hyrule is Skyrim first. There's a misconceptions video that I made, and a point that I made in that is Relics of Hyrule is not Zelda stuff in Skyrim. It's a Skyrim mod with Zelda content. It is meant to kind of weave into the game and kind of expand on it and encourage you to explore. So everything that I'm doing is designed to support Skyrim as a game and as a story, and tell my own story at the same time related to Zelda. So Skyrim comes first with Relics of Hyrule. It is a Skyrim mod. It is not a Zelda experience. So that may be confusing, but once you kind of play the mod, it starts to make sense. It does put Skyrim first, and it doesn't shoehorn Zelda in. It just kind of weaves it in. So that's it for this video. Part FAQ, part sort of behind the scenes of how I think about the mod. Hope that was helpful, hope that was interesting, and we'll see you next time.